Alright, hello everybody, we're back. Hopefully you watched the first problem type. You just watched the imaginary number 1, where we were going from a square root and removing our square root, writing using I notation. And I hope you're here for step 2, problem type number 2, where we are removing I and writing as a single square root or number. So what we're basically doing here is going from the kinds of answers that we got, and we're going backwards to figure out what things were beforehand. So again, I need those two basic facts here. I need the fact that I is the square root of -1, and again, those two things are interchangeable. One is the same as the other, so anytime I see an I, like here, I'm going to replace it with the square root of -1. And I also, of course, need the fact that I squared is -1, so any place I see I squared, like right here, I replace that with -1. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, do we need a third thing? And I think we did. What was that third thing? Oh, that's right, our brain. We need our brains, of course. But you got your brain with you. It's in your head, otherwise you wouldn't be watching the video, or else maybe you'd be mindless and be going, what's this I thing? So, you got your brain. We got those two facts we need, and now we're going to take a look at removing the I from these problems and writing as a single square root of a number. So, we'll start with -7i. Now, I, well, I know what that's equal to. I is always equal to the square root of -1. So right away, I can replace that I with the square root of -1. So I make this -7 times the square root of -1. Now, the problem is I want to combine this into a single square root or single number. The fact that I've got a square root of -1 means I'm going to need a square root in there, so I can't get a single number. But I can't merge these two things yet, because I can only multiply things that are under square roots together. If both values are under a square root, then I can combine them. Right now, I have a 7 that's outside of the square root, and a square root of -1 that can't come out unless it becomes I. And our goal is to remove the I, so that would be sort of counterproductive. So, what I need to find is a square root that's equivalent to 7. Okay? Now, we've talked about this a little bit in class, the sort of adage that, you know, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. If you got a negative in front, that negative's going to stay in front. So, negative's going to stay in front. But I need to find a square root that's equivalent to 7. And then I'm going to hopefully be able to combine that with my square root of -1. Now, if I square something and get 7, how do I figure out what that number would be? Well, if I square root it and get 7, then if I square 7, that should tell me what's inside, right? Because a square root and squaring are opposites. So if I square 7, that would give me 49. And that means that if I square root 49, that should give me a 7. So these two values, 7 and the square root of 49, these two things are equivalent, which means that I can replace 7 with the square root of 49. Again, the negative in front stays in front, 7 becomes square root of 49, and now I have two values that are both under square roots. So now I can combine those. So now I can merge those two things together. Again, the negative in front stays in front. So negative in front stays in front there. And the two values that are inside the square roots, I can now merge those into one square root. And I get 49 times -1. 49 times -1 is -49. And now I'm done. That problem has been finished. We've got an I out of there. We've merged them together into one single square root, which is perfect. Okay? Now, if I look at the second one, 12i, this one's very similar. It's basically the same idea. I have 12, which I have no problem with. I have I, which, well, I don't like it too much, but, you know, I know what it's equal to, so I can always replace it. So we'll replace that I again with the square root of -1. So this is going to be 12 times the square root of -1. So now I've got the I out of there. But again, I have that problem of one number that's not in a square root and one value that is in a square root. I need them both to be under square root so that I can combine them. So again, I have to replace 12 with a square root. And if I square root a value and get 12, it must have been 12 squared. Because 12, if I square it and square root it, I get right back to 12. So 12 squared, you can do that on a calculator, or you can hopefully, maybe some of you guys know that in your head. 12 squared is 144. So if I place that underneath the square root, 144, if I square root that, I will get 12. And likewise, I got it by doing 12 squared. Now I have two values that are both under square roots, which means now I can combine these two things together. Again, as long as they're both under square roots, I can combine them together and multiply. So I end up with one big square root here, And I have 144 times negative 1, that gives me negative 144. And again, done. Got that problem finished. If I square root 144, I get the 12. If I square root the negative, I get the I. That's where this came from. Okay? Hopefully that's pretty good. Questions so far? No? No hands? Okay. We'll move on to the next one. So I've got I times the square root of 25. This one's actually easier than the others. And I'll show you why. Again, I don't like I. I is a problem, but I know what it's equal to. So once again, we'll replace it. So this will be square root of negative 1. I replace I. And my other value is square root of 25. So I've gotten I out of there. It's square root of negative 1 times the square root of 25. The reason this is easier is both of these are under a square root already, right? In the other examples, I had to convert the 7 into square root of 49. I had to convert 12 into the square root of 144. Here I don't have to. These are both in square roots already, which means I can take these two and merge them together. And that will give me the square root of negative 1 times 25 gives me negative 25. And that's my answer. I'm finished at that point. I've gotten rid of the I. I've written it as a single square root or a single number, so we're good. Now, the last one. So this time I have an I squared, right? And I have a negative in front of it. So I've got a negative in front of an I squared and a square root of 6. Well, again, I can replace I squared. This time I'm going to replace I squared with negative 1 because I know those two things are the same. So if I do that down here, negative in front will stay in front. I squared becomes negative 1. And I have the square root of 6 here. Okay? Now, negative times a negative is positive. Or minus a negative is plus a positive. However you want to look at it. I can combine these two negative signs. These two negative signs will merge together. I will get positive 1 times the square root of 6. And 1 times anything is itself, right? So 1 times square root of 6 is square root of 6. So my answer is just square root of 6. I don't need to do anything more with that. I've got it as a single square root of number, and that, after all, was my goal of these kinds of problems. So that's all we're doing with problem type number 2. Getting rid of I and writing it as a single square root or single number. Hopefully those examples made sense. Hopefully you followed along as best you could. And this video will certainly be up there. You can pause it and rewind it at any point. You can watch as many times as you need. Hopefully those kinds of problems will make sense and will help you for your homework. All right. Turning off now.